But welcome back again. So Deanna, I'm going to let you take the privilege of introducing your panel here and look forward to it. Give them a round of applause.
Hi. So I'm Deanna Stacy from Blue Umbrella Services, which provides CX consulting. But I'm really excited about this panel today because what we're talking about is how you take service moments from strategy to execution, how you embed it in your leadership and culture. I was at Porter for 11 years. Some of you might have heard me talk yesterday, so this is very near and dear to my heart. And today we're talking to Kelly Harper and Kevin Collins. Kelly's from the ROM, Kevin's from Fairmont, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves before we get started. When we start with you, Kelly.
Thanks very much, Deanna. Thrilled to be here today. My name's Kelly Harper, as Deanna said. I've been at the Royal Ontario Museum since 2019. I'm the Vice President of Visitor Experience. Prior to that, I spent 20 years at BMO Financial Group. My last role was in a customer experience learning and development role. How do we actually help our employees understand what we're expecting them to deliver from a visitor experience perspective? So thrilled to be here today to talk.
Amazing. As Deanna mentioned, my name is Kevin and I am from Fairmont. I'm based out of the Royal York here in Toronto, which is our flagship iconic hotel, over 1,300 rooms, 80,000 square feet of meeting and event space. And I am the executive director of rooms at the property, so I oversee everything related to the hotel side, and then my counterpart oversees everything related to food and beverage. Interestingly enough, we obviously have a large number of Fairmont hotels located in Canada, so we also operate the Central Canada region, and I work very closely with our contact center as well. Somebody else's mic is on. Prior to joining Fairmont, I've spent time with Hilton, Hyatt, Marriott, and independent hotels and resorts as well. So I've made my way around kind of the big four groups of hotels here in North America.
Okay. So first question I have is really around consistency. One of the things I found at Porter is that we were dealing with many different frontline team members through different airports, from in-flight to contact center, and really trying to get that experience that was, we built through strategy, ensuring that that was consistent was something we really had to focus on. So speak to me, starting with you, Kelly, how you've done that at the ROM.
Sure. Thanks very much. So the impetus for us to kind of get all our ducks in a row was actually coming out of COVID. So coming out of COVID, our visitor experience really changed. So pre-COVID, only 20% of our visitors bought their ticket in advance online. During COVID, for us to be open during the pandemic, you had to buy your ticket online, so 80% were buying their ticket online. And when those restrictions lifted, we were really curious to see where that would land. Many institutions went back to their 80-20 pre. We landed at about 50-50, but we recognized that the physical experience didn't align to most of our visitors buying their ticket in advance. So we started introducing some new technology that I'll talk about a little bit later. But the next big impetus was we were undergoing a renovation of our Bloor Street entrance. And we recognized that the experience to come to a museum has really changed. When it started, we hired folks that were really good at transactions and selling tickets. But we were moving to a visitor-centered culture, and we needed different skill sets. And so we developed a program called Cashiers to Concierge. We really wanted our team to think about themselves as a concierge. We had two different roles. We had a coat check role. We had a ticketing role. We collapsed those into one. We spent some time piloting a dedicated contact center role, because prior to that, you would have spent 1 or 2 shifts working the contact center in a month. So we weren't getting any consistency. We weren't developing a center of excellence as well and creating those core competencies. So changing that was a huge change management plan, but we were able to articulate then what was that expectation. We were going to leverage technology with self-serve kiosks, self-serve scanners, to move away from that transactional experience. We brought our agents out from behind the desk, and really they were there to welcome the visitor, to help them plan their visit, make sure they didn't miss some of our iconic moments when they were staying, and really then structured, this is the intent. This is the experience we want to deliver. And we painted that picture for them so that they knew what the expectation was to deliver a new experience.
Kevin?
Yeah, I think what I would do is kind of rewind history a little bit with regards to hotels. And I think probably about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, hotels went in a specific direction that they wanted consistency and familiarity with the conversations that we were having with guests. And what ironically kind of happened through that was we became very script focused, right? We would provide call centers, we'd provide front desk agents, servers with a script, and they had to follow it. So about 8 years ago, just prior to COVID, we tried to kind of rip the script up and change it and really focus on principles and standards rather than a set language or a set template that had to be followed. So we kind of said, you know what, these are the characteristics that we want all of you to embed into your language. We want you to be warm. We want you to be authentic and genuine. We want you to be anticipatory, but forget the language and the scripts that have been used in the past. And by doing that, we really empowered our teams to kind of use their own personality to weave, those standards and those principles into those guest interactions and those conversations so that it was authentic. The way Kelly or the way Deanna should do a check-in or serve a table or make a reservation should be different than the way I do it because we are different people. We need to hit the same points and the same standards through that conversation, but you could do it at the beginning, I could do it at the middle, you could do it at the end as long as we got there eventually. And by doing that, we started to see some of those genuine moments come forward where it was embedded into the culture. We started to see really good feedback from our guests, and then bringing it full circle, it wasn't that we just saw it in reviews and whatnot. We brought it back to the teams themselves and said, look at the magic that you're creating, look at the opportunities for the one-off special occasions that you're going above and beyond to create because you've now had that autonomy and that empowerment to kind of use who you are to your advantage versus following a script.
So instead of scripts, it was more guiding principles, values.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And that's really where we ended up developing a kind of brand purpose statement, which is very simply make special happen. Yeah. Right? Very broad, but very specific at the same time. And if we tap into that warmth, that hospitality, that genuine sense of connection, that's where we can make special happen. And that was kind of the route of where we wanted to go.
Okay. So, both ROM and Fairmont, you think of it as an experience. And not all hotels are thought of that way, but definitely the Fairmont is, and ROM is more of an experience. But it's an experience that has a lot of different transactions. And Kelly, you spoke to this a little bit. Maybe we'll start with Kevin. Speak to me about how you ensure that those transactions feed into that experience, or they're not transactional based.
Yeah, I think, again, it kind of went back to that period of transition about 8 years ago for us at Fairmont. And it really started with the question of, did we complete a task? And I think that's the way that a lot of our people looked at the way that they operated in their day-to-day. Yes, I served a table. Yes, I did a check-in. Yes, I cleaned a room. And we wanted to remove that question and instead ask a different one. And it was, how do I feel? And how does the person that I'm interacting with feel? And that became our primary question, that after every transactional moment, can we ask that question to ourselves rather than asking, did we checkbox a task? And that started to change that culture, that embodiment of make special happen because, yes, we went through the check-in, but if I left there feeling I got something for the guest left there feeling, hey, I had a connection, I had a moment during that reservation phone call. Now we've answered that question of how did I feel? The other part of it is our leaders have to embody that every day. So we spend a lot of time with our leaders as well, coaching, looking at feedback, having them lead by example. And when you start to kind of weave all of those stories together and our colleagues see it on the front lines, they see their leaders doing it, they hear the stories of the trickle-down effect that a reservation agent connected with a guest, realized it was their anniversary, gave a heads up to the hotel, and then the hotel took that, did an amenity, upgraded a room, whatever, and then we share that back to the contact center. That's where kind of that magic starts to create for our team, right? The other big thing that we introduced last year in 2025 was an entire brand service culture training. So every colleague in Fairmont around the world, our 98 hotels, over 10,000 staff around the world went through this training, and it was developed, it took 2 years to develop, but it was routed in what is our history, which is Canadian, and we want to be authentically Canadian with who we are and that hospitality, but what does that actually mean, and how do we make special happen every day? So again, giving our colleagues examples and stories to do that.
Okay. Kelly, anything else from that shift from going from transactional to more experiential?
Yeah, so for us, the transaction was really interesting because, as I said, we had hired folks that were really good at transactions. They were cashiers, and now we were asking them to do things differently. So we really did have to reset. What does that mean? It means you're actually going to be standing for your entire shift. So get comfortable shoes, right? It's the littlest thing. It's like, but am I going to have a chair? No, because a chair is not welcoming when you walk into an organization and someone is sitting. So this is where the change management plan became a really big part of this, because people were very comfortable behind a desk. And so we really had to make sure that they understood what we were asking, but they also then felt confident in having those conversations. So it changed how we trained our employees. We had always made sure that when we opened a new special exhibition that the employees got a chance to see it. But now we wanted to see it with a different lens. We wanted them to see the exhibition so that they could take a nugget out of it, so when they were having a conversation with their visitor, they can talk about it. There's nothing worse than being at a restaurant and you ask someone, hey, how's the penne alla vodka? I don't know, I've never had it. Okay, that's not helpful, right? So we wanted to make sure that we built that into our training. Not easy to do in a unionized organization where you have to pay for every minute that someone is in your organization, but it was really, really helpful. And because a lot of the transactions were happening in terms of people buying their tickets before they arrived at ROM, we could also send them plan your visit email. So we could take away a lot of the administration questions that a visitor might have, like, where do I go? Where's the coat check? What time should I arrive if I'm seeing a special exhibition? So then the welcoming experience was a conversation. Our employees were actually making a personal connection. And I think what surprised them the most is at the end of a visitor would come back and said, hey, I saw that thing you talked about, and I'm so glad we made the time. Or you made the point of pointing out what dinosaur my son wanted to see in the dino gallery. And he just loved it, and we went back twice to see it. And so the employees started feeling much better about their role as well, because they were now making personal connections. They were actually seeing the difference they were making in the visit versus, here, Visa card, here's your ticket.
Wow. In both your organizations, there's so many elements where there could be friction or tension. Mm-hmm. One of the things I think that was talked about a bit yesterday was journey mapping, live journey mapping. Also, data was talked about a lot. So give me each of you examples where through the data or through the journey, you found some of those elements of friction or tension and how you eliminated that. Starting with you, Kelly.
So we have done journey mapping. We've done it many different times. What we were finding was more internal friction than friction with the visitor, in that our employees were making decisions multiple times for the same instance. And so we kind of adopted a new policy, and we called it decide once. So we're going to take, for some of those very consistent transactions or consistent decisions about how you're going to make a refund or how you're going to switch someone's ticket, we're going to decide once how we do that. So you don't have to decide every time, how do I do it this time? You can follow the process. The process gives you clarity, but it also gives you, the employees, psychological safety, and that they know this is what we've asked them to do, and so no one's going to get in trouble for refunding or giving a discount, because that's what we've decided. And it really freed them up to not worry and stress about some of those moments, and again, focus on the moments that really matter. And it is a way that we can quickly turn what might be friction from a visitor's point of view into a win, and the employee was part of that win. And it doesn't mean we don't revisit those decisions, and we use the feedback from the team to think about, is it working, do we need to make adjustments? But those decisions that were repeatable, that we could decide once, really changed how they could free up their time and free up their headspace to then help overcome other frictions that there might be.
I think that's really important, because a lot of times when you look at journey mapping, you're focusing just on the customer elements of it. I think the team member elements so much impact the customer elements, so it's really important to look at those as well. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, we did the exact same thing. The example that I would use in hotels, and if anybody checked into the hotel here yesterday, I hope you didn't face this problem, but it's about room readiness when a guest arrives at your property, right? I show up at 2 o'clock, the front desk agent tells me my room's not ready. I ask, when is it going to be ready? I don't know, but check-in time's 4, so why don't you come back at 4 and we'll see if we have a room for you at that point. And that's one of the biggest ones that we see across our hotels, across the industry, is that room readiness. So we did the exact same thing that was already kind of referenced, that journey mapping of what is the process that the guest goes through and how can we be proactive instead of reactive in those moments. And we saw a number of opportunities that we could ask better questions, we could engage differently, we could leverage AI and different technology tools to try and extract some information from our guests. It started at the contact center. Can we ask that question of, do you have your travel plans confirmed already? Yes, perfect. What flight are you coming in? What time are you going to arrive at the property? And then being able to give that as a heads up. But if we don't ask that question, how can then the hotel take that onus to be anticipatory and send a pre-arrival communication? We've worked to embed texting into all of our properties, so you now get a welcome text prior to your arrival, because we realize that filling out a Google form or filling out an email and sending it back can be a little bit tedious at times. So let's get a text. Everybody carries their phone in today's world, right? But the interesting thing on that guest mapping journey from the guest side was that the frustration for our guests didn't actually come with not having their room ready. It came with the uncertainty of when that room would be ready, right? So they wanted a definitive time that says, okay, the room's not ready, but give us 45 minutes. We're going to prioritize it with our housekeeping team, and we're going to get it ready for you at 3 o'clock or whatever time that would be. The other side of it is, to Kelly's point, we also mapped the back of house, what we call our colleague side of the journey, to understand, were there frictions from our customer experience side? Were there frictions from the front office in terms of how we were blocking and assigning rooms? Was there something on the housekeeping side that was causing friction? And really, we challenged our leaders that the one job of a leader is remove that friction for your team. So we went and we talked with our team, we engaged with them, and we figured out a couple different things that we could prioritize differently. Could we empower our colleagues, our front desk colleagues? We would be sitting at 60% occupancy at a hotel. We had tons of other rooms available, but that room specifically that our guest booked wasn't ready yet. Well, can we empower them? Can we create that psychological safety where they can upgrade, they can make special happen in that moment and give somebody a suite that would otherwise sit empty tonight? We can get them in early, we can surprise and delight them. So those kind of two journey mapping processes really worked wonders for us.
It's really interesting when you talk about that welcome text. We saw that a lot at Porter in our data. Probably the biggest thing we would see is communication. That would be the biggest point of friction. People want to know what's happening. So they want to know in advance what's going to happen on their flight, if there's delays or cancellations. When we changed our service model in 2022, 2023, moving into Pearson, there was a lot of work on how do we explain that? How do we make sure that people understand now what's happening, or people that had never flown Porter? And that was probably our biggest piece in all of our data always, was communication, around communication.
I think some of the challenge for us that's a little different is that for many of our visitors, they might know they want to come and visit the ROM, but they don't know when, and they just kind of know it exists, and so they just show up. So they haven't booked, they haven't made a reservation, and so how do you help the visitor with all those questions that they might have without sort of causing friction for the next visitor behind and the next visitor behind? And so working with our web team as well to make sure that all that pertinent information is much easier to find. We launched kiosks, and so the information was there. So just as when you go to the airport now, and there's one person helping at 3 kiosks, there's one person that helped 3 kiosks. Some people just want to be left alone, like myself at self-checkout at the grocery store. Just leave me alone.
Exactly.
I am good. But other people need help. They said, well, I have a question. Is this exhibition suitable for my 12-year-old? Or how long is it going to take? I only have a couple hours to visit. And so how do you balance those when there's so many unknowns for the visitor when they arrive if they've never been to the ROM before?
Yeah. Okay. I think in everything we've talked about, we've skirted around it, but it's definitely, there's culture. And it's obvious from what both of you have said that the culture of customer experience is really embedded in your organizations. Speak to me about how you've done that, how you've empowered your team members to provide that customer experience. We'll start with you, Kevin.
Yeah, I've mentioned a couple things already. Our brand and service culture training that we rolled out last year, again, every colleague went through it to be very particular and very intentional, that it wasn't through word of mouth or taking what somebody heard 20 years ago when they started in an orientation, but bringing all colleagues together, whether they'd been a year on the job or 25 years on the job, to really reset and say, this is our purpose. We want to make special happen. Where is it grounded? What does that mean? And then what we did is we went and we talk with our leaders as well, because if you really have good, engaged leadership, your colleagues feel that, they thrive in it. And the message to our leaders was remove friction, but it was also lead with heart, manage with intention. Right? We want to show up as genuine humans every day. And if our leaders do that, our colleagues are able to operate in an area that is psychologically free. They're able to make choices. They feel empowered. And that's where that lead with heart comes from. But at the same time, we want to manage with intention. We want to use data. We want to use guest feedback to be able to leverage and coach our teams, empower them, give them tools and resources. So we've kind of layered that approach in, and I think it's been very, very well received by all levels of our company. I think using data to, again, share stories back starts to embed that culture, because somebody that's new to hotels may not know that they can do X, Y, or Z, but hearing stories of somebody else making special happen for a guest, now it starts to get their kind of thought process going of, okay, I know what is appropriate, I know what I can do, and then we guide sometimes, because we don't always get it right. And that's where that safety comes back, that no decision is the wrong decision if it was made with the right intention, but let's maybe put it back into place a little bit where it's more appropriate. Giving somebody a 5-night stay worth $10,000 because it's their anniversary, okay, we can make that decision, but maybe there's something else we can do. Maybe we can treat them to a dinner, get them a nice bottle of wine when they go to the restaurant, those kind of things that maybe are a little bit more financially stable for a company in the long term. Ironically, the Ritz-Carlton, if anybody's ever familiar with the process, they've kind of made it their own, but they are allowed their colleagues to spend $2,000 per guest at any time with no questions asked. I will say, having worked for many different brands, the Ritz-Carlton is not the only one that does that, and Fairmont certainly does that as well. We are a European-based company, so our threshold is in euros, not dollars, but we do have that empowerment for our colleagues as well, and we call it the Own It program, that if a guest shares something to somebody, similar to your kind of one decision, you own that guest now for going forward. If they told you it was their anniversary, their birthday, their reason for travel, you own it, you have to make special happen for them. And there's a monetary amount that no questions asked.
That's great. So I read recently that culture decides what strategy shows up. And it made me sort of step back and think about the journey we're on is actually defining that culture. So it's really it was really interesting when I arrived at the ROM, and for many of you that have been in visitor experience, customer experience for a long time, in the beginning it was all about, we want to deliver great experiences because it drives loyalty. Loyalty is important because customers, stay longer, refer family and friends, and spend more money. And then we recognize that, wow, we need employees to deliver these experiences. So we need to think about the employee experience. ROM hadn't done an employee experience survey in a decade. When I arrived, in 2019, I asked about it. It's like, yeah, we did it a while ago, but nothing really happened with that. So we just did one last year. We're going through action planning now. And prior to that, the CEO had launched his strategic plan, and it was a 21st Century Museum. And one of the strategies in there was drive a visitor-centric culture. Well, what did that mean? So what we did was we brought groups of employees together to ask them what it meant. And it was really interesting because what they wanted was very similar to what our visitor wanted. And so they were a great sort of snapshot of that. But what's really interesting about the ROM is on one side, we have our curatorial department, folks who it has been their life's work working museum. Those are our curators of climate change. Those are the paleontologists. Those are the people that still hunt dinosaur bones in the summer in their field work, right? And so for them, this notion of visitor experience was kind of removed because they're still focused on their research. So we did have to spend a lot of time, and we're still on that journey of making the connection for everyone in the organization about what is this thing visitor-centric that we're talking about. because I'm really focused on my research and starting to make the connection between, well, admission revenue funds some of your research. And so being available and being part of that. And so there's been a huge shift over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And even when I joined the team, prior to me there, the team was referred to as visitor services. So again, it was very transactional, and then it became visitor experience. And so it's been this journey for the whole organization understanding we all have a role to play, and that people drive emotional experiences. People drive experiences. We as an organization will create the processes that support that, but it's the people, and we need to be able to be where you are and articulate this is what we're delivering, and everyone needs to understand that. So if you're just going out to lunch and you're walking across the gallery floor wearing your ROM lanyard and someone stops and asks you a question, you need to take a moment and spend some time with that visitor. It's not only the welcoming that the visitor experience team does, or the housekeeping team that keeps everything ready, or the security team. It's everyone really understanding what that is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was similar to Porter in that you've got people that are dealing always with with customers all the time, your contact center, your people at the airports, and you've got pilots where, yes, they deal with customers, but that's not their main goal. Their main goal is to get that flight there safely. We have people that were doing pricing and managing and developing loyalty programs. So it is really, really critical that they're all involved in understanding that culture and in building that customer experience culture. Yeah. We have about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to see if there's any questions to these two people. Any questions?
One in the back.
Hi, Nadia from Securian Canada. I have a question about just changing like the culture, or how you said, you went from behind the desk to standing up. Mm-hmm. Does it affect your head count? Like, how do you deal with people who are not ready to change with the company?
Yeah. A lot left the organization, or as I like to say, we're promoted to customer. Self-selected though, because it wasn't for everyone. So I can't stress enough the importance of change management, and I know it was talked about this morning in the morning session. In understanding the reason why, and having a really strong narrative, and really sticking to that narrative. Because what we noticed is that we knew we would have some outliers, and in the beginning they were really disruptive. And what we do at the ROM is we bring in often a lot of contract folks to get us through sort of November to March, get us through the holidays and March break. And we found that those that had not bought in were chirping pretty loud to the new folks. To the point, though, which was lovely for us to see because of how we onboarded and how we trained the team, they kind of said, you know what, I'm not going to listen to this person because I understand what you're trying to do over here. When you hired me, you were looking for the skills that I am now demonstrating, so I see the connection. And many of those have sort of either quieted down or, as I said, been promoted to customer. And it's still a journey. Like, we're 3, almost 4 years into it, and there's still people that are not happy they don't have a chair. But this is where we're going. And I think our next pivotal moment, it will be when our Bloor Street entrance reopens. That was really the catalyst for this. And they see the physical transformation and how this is going to change even more to what it means that we're asking them to deliver now.
We have an online question here that I'll read. Any specific way you ensure enterprise strategy doesn't just cascade down as messaging, but actually translates into observable frontline behaviors in daily decision making? Do you want to speak to that, or either one of you?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. I think, again, you have to model the behavior, and I think what we've really worked at doing with Fairmont is that it's not just on the frontline colleagues to embed this into their culture, but it's on everybody that operates in our building and in our organization at the same time. So our general manager, he's our regional vice president as well. When he's on the building, he is walking the lobby. He's interacting with the front desk team. He's stopping and helping guests with directions to the elevators. And when the team starts to see that the person that is sitting up in some executive office is doing that as well, it starts to model that for everybody, right? And that's where it really cascades down, is it's not just do this because it's your role or your job, but this is an onus of every single person, to your point, walking across the gallery floor. if we're asked a question, we have to stop and answer it. So I think that that's been key for us is modeling that. I always joke that if I make a decision sitting in my office, it's always going to be the wrong decision. You really have to be on the floor with those colleagues to hear them and work with them.
The one piece, I'll just sort of flip that a little bit in terms of the messaging. The messaging and the narrative is so important, and especially if you're going through a long period of change and a long transformation. And we as communicators and as leaders, sometimes it's like, well, everyone knows this by now, we can stop talking about this, but they don't. You know, it could have been an employee who's been with the organization 10 years and they heard it in a meeting and they just haven't internalized it yet. Or it could be a new employee and maybe it isn't as embedded anymore in our onboarding or our orientation as it should be. And one tiny example of this is we have a very open, when you come in the Queen's Park entrance, this beautiful long gallery. And when I started, I was told, don't ever put anything in the middle because, and a certain executive doesn't like that. I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. I don't understand that. And then just as he was leaving, the story he was sharing was how important that view was for the visitor, so that nothing was encumbering the visitor's view. But over years, visitor had been dropped from that narrative, and it became this, oh, well, so-and-so doesn't like it. And we had forgotten why we didn't like it. And so it's really important, I think, when you land on those key moments and those key statements, that you use them consistently. Even to the point where your staff is like, yeah, I know, it's almost like a teenager. Yeah, mom, dad, I know. But others are listening, and others may not have internalized it. And you know, they say with learning, it takes 7 times for someone to understand a message. And so I would keep those messages going, as well as the role modeling.
Yes, storytelling particularly is really important in terms of embedding that into the culture.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're at time, but thank you very much. That was great.
Thanks, everyone.